Good morning, grade sixes. So today we're going to step backwards right before the big break. We were just dipping our toes into fractions and we had been working with decimals, and we did a couple of minds-ons where you guys were asked to look at the relationships between fractions and decimals and percents. And so we're going to head back there. I've got a question that I'm going to walk you through just to kind of get your the brain juices flowing again, and then I'm going to ask you to try a similar question on your own to see how you understand the concept. So before we get started with this question here, fractions, decimals, and percents, the big piece of understanding that you guys have to be able to do this is that those three things are ways to write parts of wholes. So fractions, decimals, and percents, if I was talking about a number line, and on my number line, all of these jumps here, 1, 2, 3, these are all whole number jumps. Fractions, decimals, and percents do not represent whole numbers. We're not landing on the whole numbers. What's happening is with those three forms, we're ending up somewhere in between whole numbers, and these are three different ways to write that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take a look at the question. It says, which of these fractions, A, B, C, or D, is equivalent to 8%? And I'm going to tell you now, 8% and fractions, I want to turn them both to decimals. Decimals are easier for me to relate on both of those things, right? So starting off with, how do I represent 8% as a decimal? Well, you should ask yourself, how many percents does it take to make a whole? How many pieces have I cut my whole up into to say that I've got 8% of it? Well, if you remember from class, and probably just from your previous knowledge, 100% is equal to one whole. So again, on that number line, here's my 0, here's my 1. If I have the whole thing, that's 100% of a whole. I've got this one whole cut up into 100 equal little pieces down here. So knowing that, it's just a matter of understanding how to multiply and divide by powers of 10. There are 2 zeros in 100. I have 8%, and I want to turn that into a decimal. I'm going to divide it by 100. I want the decimal to move 2 places. So in the whole number 8, here's my decimal. It's going to jump by 2 places. It's going to go to the left because I want my number to get smaller because I am dividing. So here it goes, 1 jump, 2 jumps, and if my decimal lands here, I would fill in that empty spot with a 0, and 8% is equal to 0.08. And some of you may be reading that as 8 hundredths, which would be correct. This is what the number says, 8 hundredths. So we know 8% is equal to 8 hundredths. Now, we have to look at those fractions and go, okay, which of those fractions is going to equal 8 hundredths? Well, just saying 8 hundredths, and I'm saying it like that on purpose because I'm hoping that in your brain some of you are going 8 hundredths. Oh, 8 hundredths. These are the same thing, guys. 8 hundredths in decimal is written as 8 hundredths in fraction. It's exactly what you think it is, okay? So now we're going to be using the skills that we've been gaining with fractions, equivalent fractions. One of those fractions over there is equivalent to 8 100ths. And the question is, which one? Well, we know that we can turn fractions into equivalent fractions by multiplying and dividing the numerator and the denominator by the same number. So what happens if we take the denominators over here, pick a different color, if we take the denominators over here and we turn them into 100, hopefully one of those numerators is going to be equivalent to 8. So let's start off with D, for example. If I wanted to turn 8 tenths into something over 100, well, what did I do to my 10 to get 100? I multiplied it by 10, and if I multiply the top by 10, that would give me 80 over 100. Well, that's not going to work. That is not equal to 8 hundredths. So we know it is definitely not D. Let's take a look at C. If I have 1/8 and I want to turn it into something over 100, well, the question is, what did I do to 8 to get 100? Well, if you know that 8 times 10 is 80, and you know you need to get 20 more. Does 8 go into 20? 8 does not go into 20. I cannot multiply 8 by anything to get 100, so this one is not going to work either. Roop, roop. So let's move on to B. I want to turn 2 20ths into something over 100. Well, what do I have to do to 20 to make 100? Some of you might be going, you have to multiply it by 5. You would be correct. If I multiply 2 by 5, that's going to give me 10 hundredths. Still no good. By process of elimination now, the answer has to be A. But let's take a look at why that works. Let's go 2 over 25. We want to turn this into something over 100. What do I do to 25 to get 100? Well, I would multiply that by 4. And if I multiply the 2 by 4, it's going to give me, ding, 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 8 over 100. The answer is 2 25ths is equivalent to 8%.